The knife dropped from Officer Daniel's hand the moment he took the first bite. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He had eaten meat all his life, steaks, chops, burgers, you name it. But this piece, it was different, softer, richer, almost melting in his mouth, yet carrying a strange familiarity that gnawed at the back of his mind. His stomach churned, his heart beat faster, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to stop, to spit it out, to leave. But Daniel forced himself to remain calm. He was a cop. He had a job to do, and that job was to find the truth. The butcher shop he sat in was no ordinary shop. Nestled in the darkest corner of Old Town, its windows were fogged with age, and a dim yellow light flickered inside like a warning. The faint, metallic scent of raw meat clung to the air, mixed with something sweeter, almost cloying. People had been talking. Complaints had been piling up for weeks. And now Daniel was here to see for himself. Rumors had a strange way of twisting reality. Some people said the meat looked strange, its texture smoother than it should be, its color too pale, almost unnaturally perfect. Others whispered that it tasted too good, better than anything they had ever had, leaving an addictive impression that made them return again and again. But the whispers that made Daniel's blood run cold were the ones no one dared say aloud. Some say, "This butcher sells human meat," a trembling shop regular had told him in a hushed tone just days ago. Daniel had laughed it off then, brushing it away as a ridiculous rumor. After all, the city was full of strange tales, and police officers didn't waste time chasing urban legends. But now, sitting here with the knife in his trembling hands, the taste lingering in his mouth, he couldn't ignore the possibility. He tried to focus on the ordinary details, the butcher behind the counter, the neatly hung cuts of meat, the ticking of an old wall clock, but his mind kept circling back to that taste. It was too perfect, too human. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight, and looked around the shop, as if the answer might be hidden, somewhere between the slabs of meat or behind. The old wooden counter, the butcher, a thin, wiry man with a calm smile and eyes that seemed to see more than he let on, noticed Daniel's hesitation. "Is everything all right, officer?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "Our best cuts today. Very fresh." Daniel nodded, trying to steady his voice. "Yes, just a bit unusual," he muttered, though he knew words wouldn't capture the unease twisting in his stomach. The whispers, the rumors, the strange taste. They were all pointing to something he didn't want to believe. Yet deep down, a chilling suspicion was forming. Today, Daniel realized, he wasn't just here for an inspection. He was stepping into the unknown, a truth so dark it might change everything. He thought he knew about the city and about this butcher shop, and somewhere, in the shadows behind the counter, he felt the faintest hint of a smile, one that didn't reach the eyes. Daniel swallowed again. Whatever this was, it was about to get real. The butcher, Mr. Regeff, was an old man with a warm, inviting smile that seemed to put ordinary customers at ease. His eyes, however, told a different story. They were sharp, dark, and calculating, eyes that had seen things most people wouldn't dare imagine. There was a weight in them, as though they carried secrets that could unsettle even the bravest soul. The shop itself was strangely pristine for a place that dealt with raw meat. The scent of spices hung thickly in the air, blending oddly with the metallic tang of freshly cut flesh. Each slab of meat was lined perfectly on the counters, glistening under the flickering fluorescent light. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that it was too perfect, almost unnatural. "Best meat in the city," Raghav said proudly, his voice warm, inviting, almost rehearsed. "Customers come from miles away. People can't get enough." Daniel nodded, careful not to show his unease. He pretended to admire the cuts, running his eyes over the symmetrical patterns, the precise marbling, the uniform thickness of every piece. But he had questions, burning questions that refused to stay buried. "Where do you get your supply?" Daniel asked casually, trying to keep his tone neutral. Raghav wiped his hands on his apron, the fabric worn and stained, yet meticulously clean where it mattered. "Ah, officer," he said, leaning slightly closer. A good butcher never reveals his secrets. The art of meat, you see. Some things are meant to remain mysteries. It was meant to be a joke, a little show of charm to put his customer at ease. But Daniel didn't laugh. The way Raghav said it, the almost imperceptible pause before the word mysteries, sent a cold spike down Daniel's spine. There was something behind that smile, something waiting to be revealed. As Daniel's gaze wandered, he noticed a detail that made his stomach knot. Behind the counter was a door. It was old, scratched along the edges, and, most curiously, locked from the outside. He blinked. Locked from the outside? Why would a butcher lock a door from the outside? The thought nagged at him, pulling his focus away from the neat rows of meat. His cop instinct screamed that there was more here than met the eye, and a sense of foreboding settled over him. Something dangerous, hidden, possibly sinister, lurked just beyond that door. Before he could ask, Raghav placed a small gleaming plate in front of him. The aroma hit Daniel instantly, rich, savory, almost intoxicating. His stomach twisted, but curiosity and duty battled his instinct. "Try this," Raghav said, his smile never faltering. "My special cut, best in the city, a taste you'll never forget." Daniel hesitated, studying the butcher's face for a sign of deception. He saw none, only calm confidence. With a reluctant hand, he picked up the knife and fork and took a bite. The moment the meat touched his tongue, everything shifted. The flavor was unlike anything he had ever tasted, soft, tender, rich, and disturbingly familiar. It wasn't just good, it was uncanny. Something about it tugged at the corners of his memory, an uncomfortable familiarity he couldn't place. Daniel's pulse quickened, his senses sharpened. Every sound in the shop, the low hum of the light, the distant chatter from outside, the soft scrape of Raghav's knife became hyper-real. He knew, deep in his gut, that he had crossed a line. Whatever lay behind that door, whatever secrets Raghav hid, Daniel was now closer than ever to discovering the horrifying truth. And he also knew instinctively that once he saw it, nothing would ever be the same again. As the taste lingered in his mouth, a strange, almost sickening familiarity, uncomfortable memories flashed through Daniel's mind. 2 months ago, the city had been rattled by a wave of disappearances. Ordinary people vanishing without a trace. Workers, students, even elderly citizens. They weren't criminals. They weren't runaways. Just everyday people who had gone about their daily lives, then simply disappeared. Daniel had been assigned to the case. From the beginning, something about it had felt off. The missing persons reports were scattered, disconnected on the surface, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that a single thread was tying them all together. And now, as he sat in this butcher shop, that thread was starting to take shape. He replayed the case in his mind. Mrs. Khatri, a seamstress last seen near Old Town. A young delivery boy, gone after his evening shift. Old Town again. A street musician, vanished while playing near the crowded market square. Every missing person was last seen near Old Town. Daniel's eyes darted around Raghav's shop. The perfectly cut meat, the faint metallic smell, the meticulous organization, it all suddenly felt sinister. The subtle unease he had tried to ignore before now tightened around his chest like a vice. He took a deep breath and forced himself to look closer. The meat was strange, shapes that shouldn't exist in ordinary cuts, textures too smooth, almost human-like in their consistency. And that door behind the counter, locked from the outside, loomed like a dark secret waiting to be revealed. His heartbeat quickened. Every instinct he had as a police officer screamed at him. Something is wrong here. Very wrong. "Mr. Raghav," Daniel said slowly, his voice steady but firm. "Can I see what's behind that door?" The butcher's warm smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Daniel noticed the subtle tension in the old man's hands, the brief stiffening of his posture. "That area is private," Raghav replied, his voice controlled, almost too calm. "Customers aren't allowed back there." Daniel's eyes narrowed. His instincts flared. The unease he'd been suppressing now surged to the surface. Something about that answer didn't add up. He slowly reached for his badge, letting it flash under the dim shop light. "Open it," he said firmly, each word deliberate. "I'm asking as a police officer." For a moment, Raghav's hands froze. He blinked, the smile vanishing completely. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the calm before a storm. The faint tick of the wall clock, the distant murmur of traffic outside, it all seemed to fade. All that remained was the locked door and the tension radiating from the butcher. Daniel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His gut churned. Something behind that door held the answers he'd been searching for. The connection between the missing people, the strange meat, the rumors. The seconds stretched into eternity. Then, finally, Raghav's trembling hands moved toward the lock. The faint click echoed like a gunshot in the silence, and Daniel knew, without a doubt, that whatever lay beyond that door would change everything he thought he knew. Raghav's hands trembled as he inserted the old rusty key into the lock. The door shuddered slightly, groaning as if it had been holding its secrets for decades. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, every instinct screaming at him to be ready for the worst. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. Daniel stepped in cautiously, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The air was thick with the scent of damp, wood and something faintly metallic, but it wasn't the smell of blood. It was clean, sterile, almost unnatural. What he saw made his blood run cold, but not in the way he had feared. There were no bodies, no violence, no gore. Nothing that matched the horror he had imagined while standing outside, waiting for this moment. Instead, the room was filled with dozens of personal belongings, wallets stacked neatly on shelves, bags hanging in careful rows, shoes lined up as if in a store display, and phones buzzing silently on the floor. Each item carried a story, a life abruptly halted, a person who had vanished without a trace. Daniel recognized a few faces from missing persons, posters plastered around the city. "Where are the owners?" Daniel asked, his voice low, trembling slightly. The question felt absurd in the quiet of the room, yet necessary. Raghav sighed, a deep, mournful sound that seemed to echo off the walls. They were poor, homeless, abandoned by society. People walked past them every day, ignored them, forgot them. I offered them work, shelter, food, but they died naturally, officer. Old age, illness, no family. No one to claim them. Daniel took a step back, trying to process the words. His mind raced. He had expected something monstrous, something that would fit the horror stories whispered about the butcher shop. But instead, he faced a man who had claimed to care for the forgotten, only to make a decision that twisted morality into something almost unimaginable. "And their bodies?" Daniel asked cautiously, the fear creeping back into his voice. Raghav's eyes softened, but his voice dropped to a whisper, almost like a confession meant only for himself. "I didn't want them to go to waste. I believed if they feed the living, maybe their souls find peace. It's a mercy of sorts, a cycle of life." Daniel's stomach turned and he stumbled slightly, gripping a nearby counter for support. "So, the rumors were true," he whispered, barely audible. "You've been selling—" Raghav nodded slowly, his face calm, almost serene. "Human meat, but not from murder, officer. Only from those already gone. I did not kill them. I only prepared them." Daniel's hand shook as he digested the explanation. Twisted or not, it didn't change the fact that the law would never see it as anything other than a crime against the living, a crime against morality, a crime that could destroy reputations, lives, and trust. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the faint buzz of a phone lying on a shelf. Daniel's mind was a storm of anger, disgust, disbelief, and an inexplicable sadness. These people had died forgotten, and now, even in death, they had been made part of something dark. He realized then that morality wasn't always black and white, but the law certainly was. And in the eyes of the law, Raghav had crossed the line. Daniel stepped out of the dimly lit room, his body trembling, every nerve on high alert. The adrenaline coursing through his veins made his breathing heavy, his chest tight, and his hands shake uncontrollably. The weight of what he had just seen pressed on him like a physical force, leaving him staggered yet fully aware of his duty. He turned slowly toward Raghav, who stood silently behind the counter, his expression unreadable. The warm smile that had welcomed Daniel into the shop was gone. In its place was a quiet, almost solemn acceptance, as though the man had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "Mr. Raghav," Daniel said, forcing his voice to remain calm and authoritative. "You are under arrest." The words echoed through the shop like a hammer striking steel. Raghav didn't argue. He didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his apron and placed his hands forward in a gesture of surrender, as calm as a man who had accepted his fate. "I knew this day would come," Raghav murmured softly, his eyes meeting Daniel's with an odd mixture of resignation and hope. "But I hope one day someone will understand why I did it." Daniel's fingers hovered over his radio as he called for backup. The sound of the click and the hum of the radio were oddly comforting, grounding him in the reality of law and order. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens approached, growing louder, signaling the arrival of additional officers. Outside, curious onlookers had begun to gather, drawn by the tension that seemed to emanate from the old butcher shop. As the officers escorted Raghav toward the waiting police van, a few murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the crowd. Whispers spread quickly. The butcher? Selling human meat? All this time. Daniel turned back to the plate of meat he had tasted earlier. His hands, still trembling, pushed it away from him. Not because it was disgusting. On the contrary, the meat had tasted almost ordinary, perfectly ordinary. That realization was far more unsettling. How many innocent people had eaten it unknowingly, trusting the butcher's reputation? The thought made his stomach twist and his mind reel. As Raghav was guided into the police van, he looked through the window at Daniel. His eyes, calm and reflective, met Daniel's for a long, tense moment. Then, in a voice soft yet clear, he whispered, "Sometimes, officer, the truth is harder to swallow than the meat itself." Daniel watched as the van pulled away, disappearing down the narrow alley that led out of Old Town. A strange emptiness settled over him. The case was technically closed, the butcher shop sealed, and the evidence secured. Yet a heavy shadow lingered in Daniel's mind, a gnawing doubt about morality, justice, and the grey lines between them. The streets seemed quieter now, but the memory of the taste, the texture, the strange familiarity would not leave him. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the neat stacks of personal belongings in that secret room, hear the quiet resignation in Raghav's voice, and feel the heavy weight of the truth he had uncovered. Some truths, Daniel realized, were unbearable. Some secrets, no matter how justified in someone's mind, left scars that never truly healed. And as he walked away from the sealed butcher shop, he understood that the memory of that taste, that revelation, and that dark, strange justice would haunt him forever.